Hello and welcome to the Peru Channel Podcast. I'm your host Philip, and today I'm going to talk to you about some things that I doubt you've heard other places, but which I think will be very useful when visiting my city of Cusco. I get frustrated when I see YouTube videos or read blogs from people who pass through the city and tell you everything you need to know based on a few days here. I know it's clickbait because they want to be social media personalities, whatever that is, without really knowing much about what they're talking about. I've lived in Cusco for about 6 years now and have been in Peru extensively for nearly 19 years, including having family here. I know it better than most, and there's nothing I enjoy more than sharing my experiences and what I know with others. Okay, let's get this started. First off, everyone who comes to Peru, and likely everyone who visits any foreign country, worries about safety, including things like being robbed. The good thing about Cusco is that it's well known across Peru as a very safe city, more so than perhaps any other city in the country. Crime is minimal, and tourists are not generally a target unless they do something stupid that most travelers would not consider very smart, like leaving your cell phone on a restaurant table when making a quick trip to the restroom. Opportunistic crime does occur, but it's quite rare compared to many other places. I've only known 2 tourists who were robbed here. One had a cell phone stolen when she had it out in her hand in a sketchy neighborhood. Someone ran past, grabbed it, and continued off down the street almost before she could react. To be honest, I have my cell phone out all the time, but I'm usually very careful about knowing who's around me, and I rarely get it out on a busy street with lots of pedestrians. I still do it, but I try to step out of the way against a wall to use my phone. The big reason for that is more to keep from walking into someone while looking at my phone, as well as usually to get some shade where it's easier to see the screen. Even though I look like a foreigner, I just don't worry about it much. I often see locals walking around with their phones sticking out of their back pocket, so apparently it's not a big concern for many people who live here. When I'm not using my phone, I always keep it in a front pocket on my pants that has zippered access. I wear pants which have zippered pockets on both of the front pant legs. I've seen some with zippers in the back hip pockets, but to be honest, I really don't like those because a professional pickpocket can get into those without you even knowing. I like to see if someone's putting their hands on a front pocket. That's far less likely to happen. One habit that I also had is constantly patting the front pockets to make sure I have everything secure. It's just one of those habits that's really hard for me to break. I do it even when I have nothing in my pockets, and sometimes even when I'm just around the house. I heard a story once about a police officer visiting Iquitos who had his phone stolen from inside a zippered pocket, though. It was in the Belen market where you're constantly bumped and jostled, which makes it much easier to be robbed. Since I'm often in places like that, I prefer only front zippered pockets, and I'm constantly checking them. Another tip that really doesn't apply much in Cusco, but does in many places where quick grabs are more common, like Iquitos or Lima, is to wear your backpack with the straps over both shoulders. Having it slung over one shoulder, especially if it's a shoulder on the street side, makes it easy for a passing person on a motorcycle to grab it and roar off before you can react. Wearing a backpack with both straps makes it almost impossible for someone to grab and run. Cusco has a few bad neighborhoods like Almudena, but they really aren't close to the tourist areas, and the chances of you finding yourself there are non-existent unless you deliberately go there. So walking around during the day normally shouldn't be a concern at all, especially in the historical center or in the San Blas neighborhood. I tend to keep things like my GoPro camera strapped to my wrist when using it, but that's probably more for convenience since I can let it dangle if I need to get something out of my backpack or my pocket, or should I accidentally drop it. When I'm out with a larger photo or video camera, I never really worry though, but sometimes I keep the camera strap wrapped around my wrist if I feel any concern or if I'm in a crowd. As far as carrying other things around, to be honest, I simply don't. I don't have expensive watches or jewelry, which might make me a target, but as I said before, I really don't think there's much chance of anything being stolen unless you leave something unattended. All of this so far has been talking about the daytime. At nighttime, things do change a little bit. I wear headphones a lot during the day, for example. Either my amazing Sony XM4 over-the-ear headphones, or lately the much smaller Apple AirPods Pro headphones, which are earbuds that, with a simple change of the earpieces, have suddenly become my daily choice because they're so much smaller and work almost as good. But to be honest, I would never wear either of them after dark. I like to be aware of my surroundings and know not only who is walking close, or if someone is even walking close, but especially at night, the traffic conditions around me. I guess, to be honest, that also applies during the day because many of the colonial streets here have almost no sidewalks. So being able to hear a car approaching from behind tells me I need to hug the wall a little bit closer than normal. Believe me, on some of these streets where the sidewalk can only be seriously 12 to 18 inches wide at most, that's a really important consideration, and the information that you get from listening to cars approaching is so important. There's always been stories about robberies at night in Cusco, but I think the city has done a great job of improving security in the historical center at night, where most of the visitors are going to be. Cameras are everywhere, and both the normal police as well as tourist police are patrolling in pairs constantly. Though probably some has happened, I haven't heard of any serious armed robbery of tourists as long as I've lived here. The biggest problems happen with tourists who are out drinking and at 3 or 4 in the morning and they're staggering back to their hotels drunk. That's when problems happen, and that could occur anywhere, not just in Cusco. Should something happen to you, immediately make a report to the tourism police. They're easy to spot, and their vehicles, usually trucks, are especially visible around the Plaza de Armas. Their office is in the Plaza Tupac Amaru Segundo, or Tupac Amaru Dos, about 1 kilometer from the center of town. Making a report can be crucial to getting some kind of relief, especially if a police report is needed to replace a stolen or lost passport, as well as other belongings like credit or debit cards. In many cases, a copy of the police report is required, especially for lost passports. The tourist police are used to working with tourists, and they have a reputation as being very helpful. They can help you if you have problems with a vendor and agency too. I know of one tour vendor who still operates around the Plaza de Armas who has even been arrested. He sold me a tour several years ago that he misrepresented once and then refused to give me my money back until I went to the police, at which point, of course, he immediately refunded everything I paid. Next up, it's important to know a little bit about basic walking safety when in Cusco. These little tips apply not only here but just about everywhere in Peru, but keep in mind that every city and town has its own little quirks that make it different, so it's not exactly the same everywhere. In Cusco, crossing the street at an intersection without traffic lights always reminds me of the old video game Frogger, in which you have to guide yourself through streams of oncoming traffic. But the only difference here is that the danger is usually coming from both directions and usually quite a bit faster. That's why I strongly recommend crossing a street at an intersection with traffic lights, which will at least slow down traffic. Still, the traffic turning from one street onto the other from any direction doesn't usually stop, especially at the busiest of intersections. Even if the pedestrian light is green, be extra careful of cars coming from any direction. A red light just means there will still be a vehicle or two that will continue through the intersection, so once again, keep your head on a swivel and know what cars are coming and what they're doing in every direction. Despite all these warnings of impending doom and certain traffic accidents, the reality is that there are very, very few incidents, and they almost always occur when a pedestrian steps out from between two parked cars in front of oncoming traffic in the middle of a block. While drivers look crazy, they're actually extremely good defensive drivers and are well aware of what's going on around them. In a country like the U.S., the reliance on auto insurance to take care of a driver's lack of awareness and ignorance of basic good driving habits isn't a thing in Peru, and local drivers never ever want to be involved in an incident, even if they have the required insurance. Interestingly, it seems that professional drivers like long-distance bus or collectivo drivers are the ones most prone to accidents, often catastrophic. Lack of sleep caused by long hours of driving are often the main cause of these accidents. I've only seen a handful of auto accidents in Cusco, maybe 2 or 3 small bumps at an intersection ever. It would be normal for me to see that many each day in the U.S. Speaking of transportation, the one thing that will make a big difference in your time in Cusco, unless you're only here for 24 hours, and that will save you a lot of money, is to learn to use local transportation. Learn is probably not the best word because it's really not that difficult at all. The trick is learning where the buses go. And to be honest, even locals frequently ask if a particular bus goes where they need. While they all have main stops written along the side of the bus, even for a local person, that only gives a general idea of the route, and those names are likely to mean absolutely nothing to a visitor. The good thing is that buses tend to go in 2 general directions, back and forth, up and down the valley, or across the city from the mountain neighborhoods on one side to the other. And the cost to go anywhere in the city is only 1 sol, which is about 25 cents in U.S. money. If you get on the wrong bus, just catch another one across the street going back in the other direction, and you've only lost 50 cents, but you've experienced a part of Cusco that few tourists ever know. If you're not sure, just ask someone which bus goes to this particular place, and you can even ask the buses. There will be someone who collects your money and who's hanging out the door of the bus, shouting out all the names. Don't let that intimidate you. Just ask. Give the name of a place, like if you want to go to, for instance, Sacsayhuaman, just say Sacsayhuaman, and they'll tell you if it goes there or close enough. They'll just go see or no. While Cusco has maybe 24 or more different bus lines, the main ones that take you to the places you're likely to visit really are easy to learn, and probably the hotel or lodging where you're staying can tell you very quickly and easily which one to look for. For example, if you want to go to Sacsayhuaman by bus, instead of walking up the mountain, and trust me, that's a really challenging climb that seems to go on forever, especially since it's over 3,300 meters or 11,000 feet in altitude, you can either take the white Cristo Blanco bus or the blue and white Señor del Huerto bus and tell them you want to get off at Cristo, or just listen for that stop to be called. They'll drop you off at the Cristo Blanco statue, which you can visit, and then walk down to Sacsayhuaman, and then afterwards just walk back downhill to Cusco. I promise that's a lot easier going downhill. To be honest, I've gotten pretty sad and lazy myself. I only walk up maybe once every month or two, but now I catch a bus up and when I'm going to Sacsayhuaman, and then I'll walk back down the hill. Those same 2 bus routes continue on to the Kenko site a few hundred meters farther up the mountain, or for 2 soles, they will take you to the sites of Tambo Machay and Pucapucara, which are almost next to each other and very much well worth a visit. You can grab the bus back for the same price, meaning it's only going to cost you 4 soles for a round trip instead of 25 to 30 soles for a taxi, which doesn't even include time they'll wait for you if you ask them to at the sites. Getting to one of the region's most popular sites to visit, and one of the best, can be done in the blue and white Los Leones buses, which will take you to the small community of Choquepata at the base of the mountain on which Tipon is located. It only costs you 3 soles each way, and then you can either walk up to the site or catch a ride, as there are always some taxis available. It's a pretty long ride. I like to walk because there's quite a bit to see actually, but if you've never been there, catching a ride is probably the best idea. Be aware that regular Peruvian buses can become very crowded in town, especially around Peruvian lunchtime from noon until around 2 or 2:30 in the afternoon. I try very hard to avoid traveling on a bus at that time, as they are jammed full of people going to lunch, as well as school kids going either home from classes or on their way to afternoon classes. Since most schools have a morning and an afternoon session and children don't go to school all day, there's that midpoint where kids are coming and going, and they can be unbelievably congested. That's also a good time for pickpockets to steal from your backpack if you're not watching things really closely. It has happened. I know people who have had things stolen recently. Lastly, I'm constantly telling people the best way to make the most of your time in Cusco, or really anywhere for that matter, is to focus on experiencing the city and not just being in the city. For me, the main purpose of visiting anywhere is not to show that I was there, but for me to get to know the place where I was in that goes far beyond taking a selfie. I try really hard to avoid taking selfies. Of course, anybody who knows me knows I rarely take selfies. And I try to go to places that where I don't see other people. I try to walk through neighborhoods. I talk to people, even if my Spanish is not that good. And sometimes if they don't speak Spanish, we can still have a semblance of a conversation just using basic gestures. It's really not as hard as you think, and it makes your experience far more meaningful. The one thing that I'm constantly telling people is that the key to experiencing any place is to go slow and try to absorb as much as possible through all your senses while doing so. For instance, even though I live here, I still spend a lot of time walking through Cusco's Plaza de Armas. Unless I'm going somewhere specific and with a purpose, I walk slow and take it all in. My eyes are constantly looking in all directions. My ears try to hear all the sounds of things like families or tourists talking while walking past, sounds of vendors selling all kinds of products, even the sound of cars and police whistles and water in the fountain. I sometimes touch things like trees or lampposts, the Spanish colonial archways, the Inca stone walls, the wooden doors of the cathedral, and so much more. Even smells can tell me so much, though I tend to find that sense a lot more useful in places, at least for me, in places like markets or in the rainforest. Using all of my senses allows me to experience the Plaza de Armas rather than pass through it. And by doing so, I think that it has so much more meaning. Of course, that only applies for one tiny part of Cusco and only one part of Peru. I'm always telling people to take their time walking through anywhere that they go, because everyone seems to want to hurry, sometimes with music blaring, or they're focused on talking loudly with their friends, and they're completely oblivious to all that they're passing through. Maybe it's just me, but I can talk to my friends later. For almost everyone, this is the one chance in their life to experience what's here. There'll be time to talk about all the experience later over dinner or in their hotels or when they get back to their homes. Why most don't want to do that is honestly something I just don't understand. The next time you have a chance, try doing this wherever you are, even if it's just in your own hometown. Walk slowly and try to take in as much as possible using all your senses. Hopefully you'll be surprised at how much more meaning is your time in Cusco or wherever you are when you do this. I use the word experience an awful lot because it seems to me that's the basic meaning of travel. Just passing through Cusco or Peru or anywhere, or even just passing through life without experiencing as much as possible, especially experiencing worlds that are foreign to me, I think make me a lesser person. I truly believe that's what travel should be all about. Okay, I hope I didn't ramble too much in this episode, but these are some things that I feel very passionately about. Now, let's close out like I usually do with some of the latest news in Peru that you should know. The good thing is there really isn't much news of any great concern or anything looming on the horizon either. As of today, in mid-March 2024, when the tourist season is about to begin again, everyone believes that this will be the first real year of tourism since the COVID pandemic officially began in Peru exactly 4 years ago tomorrow. Every Peruvian, by the way, remembers March 16th, 2020, and will probably never forget that Sunday when we went into a 2-week lockdown that continued in one form or another for another 2.5 years. One thing that you need to be aware of is that the El Niño phenomenon has hit northern Peru very, very hard, with landslide and flooding still affecting much of the country. But this should finally be coming to an end soon with a return to more normal weather. Though Peru has been suffering through increasingly hot weather patterns just like the rest of the planet as the climate changes faster and faster each year. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to podcasts so you know when the future episodes are published, and share it with others who might be interested. I'm sure I'll do another episode like this with tips and suggestions, but hopefully this first one was useful to you. I'm still far behind on the PeruChannel.com website, but little by little it's filling out. I've actually been publishing quite a few more videos on my YouTube channel, and that's because I'm really having fun right now with the new video camera that I got that is fantastic for travel. I don't make any money from all of this, so the only thing I really get out of it is knowing that it's appreciated by people like you, and that's done by subscribing and sharing and leaving comments if you have a moment. All of that means a lot more to me than you know. As always, thank you so much for listening, and I hope to see you in Peru soon.